You are now listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm Paul McGUIRE. On today's program, we're going to blow open the mirage, the illusion, the delusion that most people live not in the real, tangible world, but most people that you know, to one extent or another, even if it's just on a subconscious level, they live in a world of illusions that are the product of conscious and subconscious programming. In other words, the reality that most people perceive, the reality that most people live in, is not reality at all. It's nothing more than a synthetic world or a virtual world put together to deceive you and put together to take your eyes off what's really happening. Okay, once again, you're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm Paul McGUIRE. And I want to go back to this concept, or should we say, depending upon how it's framed, I want to go back to the nature of reality. So the question I want to ask you is, do you live in the real world, or do you live in the fictitious world, the world of illusion, the world of programming? Somebody else programmed your perception to perceive the reality that you live in certain ways. And most people, the overwhelming majority of people, just go along with the flow, and they float downstream, and they turn their minds off, their consciousness off. And the tragedy is that there is a infinite personal living God of the universe, the Creator, capital C. And he didn't create any man or woman to live in a jack-in-the-box reality, an illusory reality. He didn't create people to live in that kind of reality. He created people, his original template, God Almighty, the Creator, capital C. If you want to know what God's plan is for your life, what God's plan is for mankind, all you have to do is pick up a Bible and read the first, 7 chapters of the first 7 chapters of the book of Genesis, and then you might skip ahead into, like, starting at Revelation 17 or earlier, and read what kind of world God recreates at the end of time, the new heaven, the new earth, and the new Jerusalem, all of which are magnificent, beautiful, creative, without description. So God's master plan for the human race was for them to inhabit paradise. But we've turned paradise into a nightmare. All right, now I want to get down to the nitty-gritty here. The present reality structure that we live in by consensus. Consensus is a kind of group agreement, whether you acknowledge that you're part of a group agreement or whether you don't acknowledge that you're part of a group agreement. The fact of the matter is that the overwhelming majority of people have surrendered their thinking, their perception, their logic and reason. They have surrendered it to invisible powers that on an individual level are far greater than themselves. And as such, they live in a world of illusions. Now, this is imperative for you to really understand and to properly analyze. Because the fact of the matter is, if we are, by consensus or by individual choice or whatever, if we as the human race agree, consensus, to live in an imaginary synthetic world, a world of illusions, then what happens is, because of our choice, we end up living in a world of illusions, a synthetic reality. Now, why? We know what God's plan was and is because God is love. So God created mankind, Adam and Eve, to live in paradise, beauty beyond the ability to describe. And so mankind was created to live in paradise. Now, we are all the product of a dumbing down process, both in America and around the world. And I'll prove it to you very quickly. I've used this analogy many times. I'm sitting here in the studio of the Paul McGUIRE report, and the height where the ceiling is approximately, give or take, 14 feet high. Now, because of the wood, the drywall, and the other construction materials that compose the roof, those physical barriers do not allow me to transcend or bypass that 15-foot blockage, or you could even say stronghold. They don't allow me to push on past that mental, spiritual barrier. So that implies that there must be some kind of force, some kind of power, some kind of entity, some kind of being, or if you're really crazy, you might imagine that there must be some kind of artificial reality glued together by some kind of consensus where mankind agreed that this would be our reality. But face the music. That's not what it's about at all. Not at all. What reality is nothing more than a composite of all the individuals in a given reality and their choices in terms of assembling that reality into some kind of coherent whole. But now we're going to dig deeper. We're going to face reality because the only way to gain truth is to face reality. We have to remember when we're talking about truth, truth and reality ultimately are synonymous. That's why Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. So as we look at this world, and most people don't, most people literally spend almost no time looking at this created world that we live in. Most people do not analyze the world we live in. Most people do not question the world we live in. Most people do not think about the world we live in. They're born, they live, they're raised, they get some kind of education, no matter how bad that education may be, and they just essentially choose to exist. Just to plain old exist. And therefore, because they have made that fatal choice, their end game in life is that they desire to do nothing more than merely exist by agreeing with this illusion all around us. Now, for anybody to do that, by the way, is total madness and insanity. Only an insane person who's mad could look at the complexity, the design, the creativity, the precision, the laws of physics, the laws of genetics, the laws of science. Only a fool could look at all that and say all of that just somehow, after a massive galactic explosion, it just went bam and glued itself together. And so we now live on this space rock and attempt to live day by day. Okay, that appraisal of reality is based on a complete falsehood, a total falsehood. The fact of the matter is, this space rock that we live in, this world that we live in, is the product of a very intentional, specific design. It's the product of a very specific plan, and its design has a fundamental purpose. Our job, first and foremost, is to understand the fundamental design and the purpose of this world. Because if we don't know that, we are slaves. That's why Jesus Christ said, you shall know the truth shall set you free. But if you do not know the fundamental purpose and plan for your life, you threw yourself in one of God's supermax prisons. And you're a prisoner. You may think you're free, but you're really a prisoner. And so billions of people on planet Earth just march around like dumb donkeys. And I don't say this with any delight or rejoicing. But one of the worst tragedies that there is that this contingent of dumb donkeys is largely populated by those who claim to be born-again Christians. Why? Why? Because if you were truly a born-again Christian, you would have the Holy Spirit, which is the Spirit of truth, living inside you. From your inner man or inner woman, you would be continually supernaturally energized to pursue the truth, to discover the truth, and to open up the doors of higher consciousness and reason. And you would have an unquenchable thirst to find out what the purpose of reality ultimately is. And that's where we're headed. Haven't you asked yourself this question? I did. In fact, I asked this question throughout my whole life, and I was attacked my whole life because of it. Because it wasn't correct. If you wanted the acceptance of your peers and your teacher and so on and so forth, you had to agree to play the game of don't question anything, just go with the flow. Don't ask heavy questions, because number one is the people teaching you have no clue, have no answer whatsoever to what the heavy questions are. So just go with the flow. And so this is very difficult for me, and perhaps very difficult for you, because when I go back to my early childhood, starting in first grade, second grade, and pivotally third grade, when I go back to my early childhood, I experienced a series of intellectual, spiritual, logical, rational epiphanies where I realized that everybody around me had married the illusion. They were not participants in society. They had given themselves over to be the slaves of society, which brings us to the first among many super secrets that must be discovered in order for you to be fully alive and in order for you to fulfill your purpose in life. So it goes down like this. And you have to know this. It goes down like this. This entire world, this entire nation, including the way that it is organized, including the way that it is planned, including the way that it is set up. Everything in this world which appears to be happen chance, everything in this world which appears to be random chance is definitely not. Everything in this world ultimately has been created first by God, the Creator, capital C, and then secondarily, everything in this world has been created by a very powerful but totally evil being whose name is Lucifer or Satan, along with the fallen angels and all the billions of people who have sold their souls for power and other things to the fallen angel, Satan. So ultimately, the underneath hidden architecture of this world is a satanic world. From top to bottom, if you're awake, you can't experience a great awakening if you're walking around like a zombie in a sleep state. Let me say that again. You can't claim to desire or to experience a great awakening spiritually if you're walking around in a sleep state, if you're walking around like a zombie or unconscious. You have to experience a great awakening on an individual and personal level first, before you can participate and live in the reality of a great awakening on a planetary and national level. So let's just quickly review things. First of all, why are the heavens, the planets, the stars, and the earth, along with their orbits, etc., why do they move in mathematically perfect perfection? Why doesn't Mars accidentally collide with Earth? You see, this entire global system, I'm talking about the galactic global system, it mathematically is engineered And it's obvious if you study it that the master engineer who created the whole thing, he created the whole thing with the intention of making it a workable science and technology on a supernatural, superhuman level. So look then on the societal level. Every microscopic thing on the level of society, everything on the level of society is designed to secretly enrich a super wealthy billionaire, trillionaire, globalist elite at your expense. They have planned out and implemented in 1,000 different ways an elaborate system 24/7, which robs you of the fruit of your labors, which siphons off your money through many stealth mechanisms, which cuts your lifespan down by anywhere from a third to one half, because the food that you eat is nothing more than an incremental drip of toxic, poisonous materials. We're not talking about somebody by accident dropping in, 50 toxic materials. We're talking about a planetary and national food supply that has been intentionally corrupted with all kinds of poisons and toxins, designed to do all kinds of things to prematurely age you, to reduce your lifespan, to dumb you down, and so on and so forth. So you look at the clouds, which are now in our lifespan, they're artificially manufactured in terms of weather modification technology. And they are loaded with chemicals like fluoride. Fluoride, beginning before Adolf Hitler, was a chemical that was designed to dumb down the masses. Fluoride was designed to make people dumb, reduce their perception, reduce their IQ, reduce their intelligence, and reduce their ability to understand reality. Fluoride, which is in our drinking supply and via our water supply and the chemtrails, fluoride is everywhere. It's in children's cereal. And I just read a scientific study today which says water with fluoride in it can significantly and radically reduce the IQ of children. And then you have toxic heavy metals falling from the sky on a continual basis. Some are radioactive, some are simply deadly. Things like radioactive materials, things like fluoride, things like the internal properties of what makes the vaccine work. What's the trigger? What's the ultimate trigger that allows the vaccine to fire off in your biological and mental being? What is the primary chemical trigger that activates the vaccine? The primary chemical trigger that activates the vaccine is a chemical known as graphene oxide. Graphene oxide is the operative ingredient in all vaccinations. All vaccinations work primarily because they're operating on the fuel of graphene oxide. Graphene oxide poisons the body, reduces your lifespan, and most of all, graphene oxide in your body or brain is submicroscopic, and graphene oxide becomes a self-evolving nanobot, a self-evolving technology which can invent itself into a counterfeit technological human being. And so because your body, whether you realize it or not, is filled with graphene oxide, your body is also now a broadcaster of electromagnetic frequencies as well as a receiver of electromagnetic frequencies. And they can fire a beam of EMF from a satellite from Africa, from India, and because every person alive has their own individual and unique electromagnetic frequency. When they fire off an EMF at you from anywhere on the planet, and then via computer it goes directly to where you biologically and physically are, that graphene oxide enters your body and brain, and then instantaneously the graphene oxide on a nanoparticle level finds you because you are broadcasting a specific numerical electromagnetic frequency. In addition to that, when you broadcast that specific EMF frequency, that makes it possible for the graphene oxide and the nanoparticles to be activated. Then a second activation occurs. First, you are a broadcaster, and second, you are a technological receiver, a radio receiver, or a receiver of electromagnetic frequencies. So you're walking around doing your thing, but you're constantly broadcasting an EMF frequency. You're walking around and doing your thing, but you're constantly receiving an EMF frequency. Why would they do that? They told you that if you took the vaccine, you would protect yourself from getting sick with COVID-19. But up until this date, scientists have not concluded if there ever really was something called the COVID vaccine. In other words, scientists are speculating that the entire COVID vaccine epidemic was purely mythological and that there was no COVID vaccine or COVID-19 virus. There was no COVID-19 virus. The COVID-19 virus apparently was nothing more than what your body felt in terms of it felt like it was sick because your body had become a receiver and you were now receiving the electromagnetic frequencies of a synthetic COVID vaccine. You now had the graphene oxide, so you were absorbing a synthetic virtual vaccine that made you feel like you had caught a virus. But the fact of the matter was, these scientists are suggesting that there never was a virus, that the entire thing was a psychological warfare operation, that it was a psyops operation, and that the real purpose for manifesting COVID vaccine in the global and national population was to give them the cover to activate one of the world's most powerful bioweapons. And through the graphene oxide, the COVID vaccine activated is now one of the world's most powerful bioweapons. And it through an illusion, it made you feel like you were sick. So the feelings of sickness, the symptoms, and even the death potentially were the product of either the COVID vaccine being activated or potentially the COVID vaccine being active, coupled with the activation of the virus. So the virus and the COVID vaccination worked in synergy to produce a synthetic virtual disease. And so it goes on and on and on. Why do we have a big pharma department that manufactures, or businesses that manufactures medicine that kill you, and they never seem to cure? Look at all the list of fatal diseases in America. Look at the list. And then look at a list of how many of these fatal diseases have been cured. And the answer is almost zero. That's right. Almost zero of the fatal diseases killing men and women, almost zero of these fatal diseases have ever been cured. And yet, people are constantly raising collectively trillions and trillions of dollars to quote, cure all these diseases. How many years have they been talking about curing cancer? And now they're talking about it again. I don't know if they've cured it or not. But over the last 70 years, they've spent trillions of dollars curing cancer, and they never cured it. Have they ever cured diabetes? No. We could go down the list for 3 hours. Our medical system is an illusion. It's not curing any of the diseases that they're spending trillions of dollars attempting to eradicate. And why is that? Because the real purpose of all the fundraising for these deadly diseases is they want a legal license and a financial gateway to raise trillions and trillions of dollars in creating the public's expectation that they're going to cure all these diseases. Parkinson's disease. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And guess what? The sober, stark reality is, of all these diseases, they have essentially cured 0 of them. So they're raising money, but they're never curing people of the diseases. So what's the point of having Big Pharma? There is no point. It's a scam. Let's look at our banking and financial system. Most people don't even know the basics of the financial system. The basic foundation of the financial system is simply this. First of all, international bankers from all over the world met on Jekyll Island and concocted a devious plan and changed the laws so that they could print money from nothing and then loan the money out to governments and individuals. They loan them money that came from the money where they printed money from nothing. So they print money from nothing, and then they loan that same money that they printed from nothing to governments and people, and they make a fortune. They make trillions of dollars a year and massive fortunes simply by printing money from nothing and loaning it to governments and the people for interest. So you pay interest for the right to borrow money from these financial institutions. And the fact of the matter is they don't have any money. It's all an illusion. They print money from nothing and then loan it to you and loan it to governments. And the whole thing's a Ponzi scheme. How did all this evil complexity rise to the surface? What's going on here? I mean, if you don't think about this, there's something wrong with you. What's really going on here? What's going on behind this masquerade ball? And we need to find out, because we live in a Luciferian system. And you need to know that. This is the Paul McGUIRE Report. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. This is the Paul McGUIRE Report. Again, I need your help in spreading this message and the gospel of Jesus Christ far and wide. So I ask you to obey the Lord and give whatever it is He's telling you to give, and make a contribution or a financial gift to Paul McGUIRE Ministries in Paradise Mountain Church securely at paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. Okay, let's examine the money system in America. Originally, the money system in America, because America is the byproduct of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. So originally, the financial system in America was built to be in the total control of, quote, we the people, we the people. So what that means is we the people are supposed to own and control and manage and direct everything to do with our financial system. That means legally it is only we the people of America that have the legal right to print money, print currency, have the legal right to create recessions, depressions, inflation. Only we the people have the right to do that. Nobody else does. Only we the people. We are not supposed to be under the control of an elite globalist Luciferian international bankers. We're not supposed to be dominated by them, but the fact of the matter is that we are. So in 1913, 1914, they passed the Federal Reserve Act. Most Americans have no clue as to what the Federal Reserve Act is. The Federal Reserve Act was what I call the Great Heist. The international bankers, the international banks like Rothschild and Rockefeller and all the others, they put two bills before Congress. One was targeted to the Republicans, one was targeted to the Democrats. So each bill had a different name because the bankers were trying to fool the American people into thinking that they were being presented with a legitimate offer of two entirely different banking systems. But that was a facade. The fact of the matter is, the whole, the different names for the banking systems during the Federal Reserve Act, the only reason they had different names is they were trying to conceal so they could steal. So, and that's exactly the primary purpose of the Federal Reserve banks was to give access to the super wealthiest trillionaire, billionaire families in the world and the banking institutions that they owned, which are called central banks. And the whole Federal Reserve Act was a great heist that allowed the international bankers to steal trillions of dollars from hard-working American citizens, we the people. It was a massive theft. And all kinds of illegal things were enacted into law. First of all, it is now the international bankers that control the monetary system, not we the people. They control whether there's inflation, recession, depression. They control all that stuff. They print money from nothing and then loan it to banks, loan it to nations, loan it to we the people for massive amounts of interest rates. So they make trillions and trillions of dollars by simply printing money from nothing and then charging huge interest rates on the loan of that money to nations and peoples across the planet. This is a great heist. It's a great secret, and it's being done right out in the open. Now, Europe had the same thing. The only difference was the international bankers in Europe called their international banking system the central banks. But the central banks were created for one reason only. The central banks were created to give over the entire financial power and wealth of any nation like France, Britain, Greece, or whatever. The international bankers were able to seize all the assets, all the wealth, all the money, anything of value. The international bankers were allowed to steal it through the mechanism of what they called the central banks. So the central banks and the billionaire trillionaires were one and the same. So they wanted to take over America's money supply, take over America. But they knew they couldn't pitch it under the name of a central bank, or Americans would have rioted in the streets, because Americans knew the evils of a central bank and they would have nothing to do with it. So all they did was play the old switcheroo. They called a central bank by a brand new name. That brand new name was called the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System was enacted in 1913, 1914. All it was, in reality, was a central bank under a different name. And that's why the Federal Reserve System is not under the control of we the people. It's not under the control of our governments, politicians, presidents. The Federal Reserve is a completely independent, autonomous, separate organization that is owned entirely by the wealthiest of international banking families from foreign nations in Europe and other nations. Which, by the way, if you compromise the entire United States government by giving away the entire financial system to foreign international bankers and foreign international banks, the fact that you are giving away the economic power, the military power, and the wealth, you're giving it over to central banks owned by foreign billionaires from other countries, that in itself is a major illegal thing. because the case could be argued by some lawyers that allegedly you have, when you defaulted on the American monetary system and bankrupted it on purpose, you by default created a time bomb, which is destroying America. And so destroying America, whether it's by a time bomb in finances or other weaponization, destroying America is, in terms of the violation of laws, it's high treason. So if indeed these people stole our money supply, they and all who empowered them potentially, questionably, could be arrested for high treason. This is serious stuff. Rothschild was so arrogant, his family was worth trillions of dollars, and I'm going to paraphrase him, but he basically said, I don't care who's president or prime minister, who was on the Supreme Court, Rothschild said. The only thing I care about is how much money they have. Because money is the power. I don't care if they're president. And then Rothschild boasted, because I own all the money and because I control all the money, I then have the power to dominate and control and rule over the masses, rule over the prime ministers, rule over the presidents. I don't care if they have armies or anything else. They can have all the soldiers they want, and they can have all the politicians and votes that they want. But when the day is done, I rule, I own, I dominate, I control every nation in the world. They are part of my, and I'm paraphrasing, he didn't use it, he didn't say these words openly, but he basically said, I control the entire global monetary system. And as such, because of that, I control the world and all the people in it. That's sobering. And that's the way it is. So we're on the precipice of going to war against, well, we're on the precipice of having a war between Russia and the Ukraine and the EU or European Union. Now, who is it that's driving us to get into a war with these powerful nations? Well, the people who are driving us to get into a war with these powerful nations are the globalist elite, because they make big money on wars. So then you got to ask yourself, who controls America? And people say the deep state. Well, it's great that you said the deep state. That's a beginning. But who the heck are the deep state? It's not enough to know that the deep state control America. That's symptomatic of ignorance. It's not enough. It's not sufficient to know who the deep state is. Excuse me. It's not sufficient enough to know that the deep state rule America. You got to know the whole truth. And the whole truth is this. It is that the deep state rules over every branch of power in America and around the world. The deep state controls the world and controls America and controls the military and controls the politics. So who are the deep state? The deep state isn't some mysterious ghost-like entity. The deep state is composed of the wealthiest men and women from billionaire families and trillionaire families. These are the people whose money entitles them to rule the world. These are the people whose money gives them the power to take over planet Earth. Why is it that we have technologies and big pharma technologies and everything else that currently are on track for killing billions and billions of people? Yeah, it's happening right now. They're being given treatments that are killing them. How is it that we're allowing billions and billions of people to be killed? Doesn't make sense, does it? Well, not really, but it does make sense if you understand the foundational truth, which is simply this. America and all the people in America and the world and all the people in the world are under the total domination the total control, the total rulership of the wealthiest international banking families, billionaires and trillionaires in the world. They control everything. They rule over everything. They don't give a blank what we think or what we like. Did you ever ask yourself, why does America keep getting worse and worse when we're constantly told we're on the verge of a breakthrough psychologically, spiritually, economically that will solve all of our problems? How is it that we keep hearing America's getting better? We keep having new technology. How is it that all these so-called positive things are transpiring, but when we go out to examine with our physical senses what's really going on, we observe the fact that America day by day is getting worse and worse and worse, and America day by day is getting evil and more evil. Listen to me, there is an evil system in place. That is the root cause of the evil that's flourishing. And who controls this evil? The globalist elite, because they are evil. They worship Lucifer and Satan as their god. Why does this billionaire, a guy you know, he goes to Kenya and he artificially manufactures millions of mosquitoes that carry deadly diseases and can spread deadly pandemics like monkeypox and bird flu. How come he's free to do and murder as many people as he wants? Because he's got the money. So what this individual did the other day is they went to the government of the nation of Kenya in Africa, and they literally threw millions down on the table and said, we demand that you give us diplomatic immunity and give our corporation and everyone in our corporation complete diplomatic immunity. Now remember, diplomatic immunity is when an official diplomat lives in any given country. Like we have, I don't know, tens and thousands of diplomats living in the United States of America. Because they're diplomats, they cannot be arrested for committing a crime, no matter how horrible a thing that they do, raping, killing, sex trafficking, breaking the law, stealing money, no matter how horrible a thing that they do is, they cannot be arrested, they cannot be prosecuted, they cannot be jailed or anything else because they have total legal immunity because they're diplomats. Now, this wealthy billionaire, trillionaire, has bought the nation of Kenya, and Kenya has given them full diplomatic immunity, which means if they murder people by the millions, they completely have diplomatic immunity. No matter how horrible the crime is that they do, this company, the heads of the company, and the people in it, no matter what they do, no matter how evil a thing they do is, they have total diplomatic immunity. They're untouchables. And this is the secret system that we live under. So, what is the answer? What is the solution? If you opt, number one, to space out and disconnect and not think about it, you are ensuring your own annihilation and your family and your children's annihilation. These people are evil beyond evil. History is filled with examples of this evil strain of people that have existed for many thousands and thousands of years, and they have an historical track record of committing all kinds of unspeakable evils and abominations. If you want to know what these people are capable of, just look at the black and white films and pictures of what went on in Nazi Germany with the concentration camps and the Nazis. And what they did was unspeakably evil. Unspeakably evil. And they were part of this secret cult that's still around today. In fact, it's the secret cult which controls the major power centers in America and around the world. Let's give you another example. There are trillionaire families who manufacture and farm agricultural products that are filled with poison, that are filled with deadly poisons, that are filled with toxins, so that the food you eat and the food your children eat is guaranteed to kill you by a particular date. And they knowingly pour endless amount of pounds of pesticides, of manipulated DNA, of heavy metals, and all kinds of carcinogenic and deadly life-killing materials are put in our food supply, and they're everywhere, and every supermarket is inundated with poisons. And so just by shopping and just by eating, you're killing yourself, you're poisoning yourself. Again, why is it that there are people who are part of a secret cult who actively are getting away with doing the things that I described? How does it go on century after century? Now I want to stop for a moment. People say they're a Christian. People say they're this. People say they're that. How can you claim to be virtuous? How can you claim to be loving? How can you claim to be good when the reality is you're a monster? You're a monster, and you're guilty of committing monstrous crimes constantly and enriching yourself obscenely by the evil that you do. These people are fully aware and are fully cognizant of the fact of what they're doing. They know they're killing people, mutilating people, involved in sex trafficking, and on it goes. These people are monsters. But how is it they flourish in our society and no one touches them? This is the reason why. They own the system, like Rothschild said. They own the system. They own the judges. They own the courts. They own the lawyers. They own the media. They own law enforcement. They own intelligence agencies. They own everything. And because they own everything, they can never be prosecuted or arrested because they have enslaved, listen to what I'm saying, please. They have enslaved humanity. And the only way humanity will be able to break free from this tyranny, this oppressive slavery, is to declare an all-out spiritual war on the promoters of this evil system. Eventually, Christ will return to the earth, and he will conquer the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan. That's on the horizon. But in the interim, we have to survive. We have to occupy until he comes, and we have to exert the power and the knowledge that God has given us. And I would suggest that you separate yourself from fellowship and friendship with cowardly Christians, Christians who are ruled by fear, controlled by deception. Why? Because you become like the people you hang out with. Okay, I need your help. I need your prayers. I need your gifts and contributions. I need you to go to our social media main page, paulmcguire.us, and electronically follow us on Rumble and Facebook or X. Electronically follow us on all the different social media channels. And do it quickly. And you can find the links to all of those channels. Pick the ones that you listen to, and you can electronically link up to all of these channels on our main website, where when you scroll down, you'll see a list of large links that will take you directly to all the social media pages we're on. And then you got a choice. You can be a cop-out, a fake, a phony, a hypocrite, and do nothing about the plague of evil sweeping over our nation. Or you can be a true woman or a true man of God and take a stand in history's most fragile moment. But together with the Lord Jesus Christ, who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, we shall prevail. Remember, Jesus told us, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Truth grants us freedom and power. You can't be a slave and be a knower of truth and free at the same time. You have to become self-informed and educated, at least to some degree, so you don't sound like an idiot when you start talking to people. And you have to recognize that God Almighty put you here on this planet at this time in this season for a particular reason, a particular mission, which is to engage in law-abiding, peaceful, spiritual warfare and take back all that was stolen from us. You see, this dark cult, which I'm alluding to, is ruthless. They justify raping little girls and raping little boys and torturing them mercilessly. And you think, oh, I'm making that up. No, you're ignorant, and God's going to hold you responsible for being willfully ignorant of a truth that has been widely published even in the mainstream media over the last 7 years. You don't stand idly by while young children are raped, mutilated, and tortured for fun. You don't do that. And if you do, if you think you can please God by laying low, you're in for a rude awakening. But guess what? How about instead of being in for a rude awakening, how about being ready and prepared for a great awakening? A great awakening, which begins with each one of us, and each one of us are carriers and transmitters of the Holy Spirit. And as each one of us draw closer to God, this releases the supernatural power of God upon America and the nations of the world. And the energy of the kingdom of God begins to build and build and build until there's an explosion of light, and that explosion is known as the dunamis dynamite power of God. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us.